Good morning. Good morning. Hey, Danny. Okay, gonna make you co-mod here.
Good morning.
Thank you for letting me take the lead on this one. I'm super excited to chat with Michael.
Of course, no problem.
hmm And there is Michael. Good morning, Michael. Welcome to the room. And Jonathan down there, good to see you. I'm just going to take a couple minutes here before we kick off to just invite other people to join us in the room. And if any of you would care to do the same, it's super easy. If you're on your phone, just click the square with an arrow pointing out of it up, or the person with the plus sign, and you can either share within Clubhouse, people you know who are in Clubhouse and online right now, or you can share with outside of this room. And I always encourage people who are coming to join us to do this, to share, because the Flourish Academy rooms, we are labors of love, and the reason we do that is we believe in that all this education should be accessible to everybody, and the more and more people who we can share, evidence-based, knowledge-based information with, and who we can, help to destigmify, yeah, that's the right word, destigmify and demystify,
Destigmatize.
destigmatize. I tell you what, my household's been a little bit unwell this week, and I actually cracked the fever overnight last night, so I am just feeling a little gray in the head, but destigmatize and demystify. So yeah, please do ping other people in before we get started. And I am super excited to be talking about psychedelic community building today, which is something that is so near and dear to my heart. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dana Harvey, and I am the founder of the Flourish Academy. I'm also a facilitator and head of communications and partnerships with gathering groups. So I provide microdosing and peak experience guidance and facilitation, both individually and through groups. And one of my key pillars in this psychedelic space has been, well, I've had three pillars, which is first, to provide loving guidance, second, to share evidence-based knowledge, and third, to cultivate supportive communities, which I think are incredibly important, particularly in the psychedelic space, but also just because I truly believe that the biggest dis-ease in our world today is disconnection from ourselves and disconnection from others. And I believe that community is medicine. Community is medicine every little bit as much as psychedelics are medicines. I would venture to say even more. They are such an incredible basis for building a relationship with psychedelics and plant medicines. For so many reasons, and also for integrating plant medicine experiences. What better way than to have a community to do that with? And particularly, in this gray area that we're in, operating in here, it's not always easy to talk about plant medicines and psychedelics and personal growth and development, and really share your vulnerable parts with your family and your friends these days. So just having a safe space where you can grow and develop and share authentically and openly with other people in this space, I find is so important. So we're going to be talking about psychedelic community building with Manifest It Man there, Michael Oliver, who is in my eyes like the penultimate community builder. He's built an incredible community that is Vancouver based but has recently gone global. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about that community, the Flying Sage, today. But I'm going to kick it off with the disclaimers, and I'm also going to say thank you to Danny, who is my co-moderator in this room, and Wendy, who's my co-moderator in this room. This is a room that Danny generally leads for the Flourish Academy, and he has given me the honor of being able to lead today so that I can chat with Michael. With Michael and I both being in the same Vancouver-based community, I'm actually a community leader with the community, with the Flying Sage as well. Again, highlighting how critical I feel community is, and how much that is really part of one of the things I offer to the world and feel so passionate about is cultivating supportive communities. So let's just kick off the way that we usually do, everybody. Welcome to this room. This is Psychedelics 101, and we meet every Friday morning to talk about everything and anything psychedelics. We are part of the Flourish Academy Club, and the Flourish Academy meets 3 mornings a week, always at 9 a.m. Pacific. On Wednesdays, we host Entheogens and the Divine Feminine, alternating with the Divine Masculine. Wednesdays is Thursdays is Psychedelic Microdosing 101, and Fridays is Psychedelics 101. Our team here at the Flourish Academy is myself and Danny and Wendy, so much gratitude to them. So here in the Flourish Academy, we are not licensed medical or licensed mental health professionals, so nothing said in this room is meant to be medical, mental health, financial, business, or legal advice. We don't promote or advocate illegal activity, and we know that in many places, taking and having psychedelics are still illegal. So we are here for education and harm reduction only. This room doesn't tolerate the sourcing of substances, so please don't offer and please don't ask. We are honored to have many world-class experts and guests join us in our rooms for deep dives into specific and sometimes controversial topics. We're proud to create a forum for these conversations. However, hosting a guest does not necessarily imply that we endorse their viewpoints. The Flourish Academy is a safe space, free of judgment. We're a community and a family that supports and encourages each other. So with that in mind, please keep your shares respectful and also respectful of time. When we have guest speakers like today with Michael Oliver, we'll spend about 45 minutes having a podcast style interview. And during that time, we'll be inviting other people to join us up on stage, and you can put your hand up if you'd like to join us. And after about 45 minutes, we will open up the room to you, to audience participation, to your shares, to your stories, to your asks. So please note that all rooms with guest speakers like today are recorded and may be shared both within and without Clubhouse. So if you do make a choice to join us, you are implicitly agreeing to being recorded. So finally, before we begin, we always just like to start with just a moment of gratitude. So if it's safe for you and if it's comfortable, I invite you to close your eyes. Maybe take a deep breath of gratitude in through your lungs, feeling gratitude, bringing to mind maybe 3 things that you're personally just grateful for in your life. And I'm so grateful to each and every one of you for showing up here today, for being willing to learn, to share, to grow, to develop. I'm so grateful to be living in a peaceful country when so many other people in this world are not. I'm grateful to be coming to you today from the territory of the Coast Salish peoples, the unceded territories of the Musqueam, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Squamish nations. And we just want to express gratitude to Mother Earth, who holds us in the belly of her womb and who gifts us with sacred plant medicines to expand our consciousness, to heal, and to grow. We're grateful to our ancestors, to our elders, to those who have come before us, and to the indigenous people of all our lands who have, over time, shared the beauty and the mystery of these plants with us. Whew, okay, we are good to get started. Thank you so much for joining me in that moment of gratitude. For me, it really does help me to feel really present and here in the moment. And once again, welcome everybody. I do encourage you to invite other people to join us in this conversation if you feel it might be useful to them. There's a couple of ways at the bottom of your screen, and we're going to be talking with Michael Oliver specifically about Psychedelic Community Building. So, Michael, hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here on Clubhouse with you
Yeah,
guys.
I guess it's probably been a while for you since you've been back on this platform, hey?
It honestly has been. Yeah, I think the last time I was on here was a couple of years ago when there was a bit of a crypto bull run happening. And back then I was kind of getting really into it. And there just happened to be a lot of people in the crypto space that were hopping on here along with psychedelics too. I noticed both of those communities were kind of flocking here. And so I was part of that. But yeah, it's been a while since I've been back here, so I realized I had to update a lot of things on my bio because it was back when I was here. I think I was still working with maps, and so I had to change a few things.
Yeah, it definitely was during COVID. It was the place for psychedelic conversations and crypto
Yeah,
and also yeah, psychedelic investing too, like a lot of that kind of stuff.
right.
But yeah, the psychedelic community has actually stayed pretty active on this app. I mean, thus we are still here. We have a beautiful community here. But yeah, it's great to welcome you back.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I want to start by, when we have guest speakers, we give them a little form that helps us to guide the conversation, and we ask them for their bios. Michael is not, not only a great community builder amongst many other things, but you're also very humble. So your bio is Michael is a community builder, a business optimizer, and a psychedelic guide based in Vancouver, BC. He's the founder of the Flying Sage and Legacy Journeys. But please let me expand on that just a little bit.
Okay. Thanks.
I have to say, I'm also super honored. Michael and I have worked together as partners in this space for probably 3 years, maybe even more than that.
Yeah.
I'm losing count now. We have sat for many journeys together. We are partners in facilitation for individual journeys. And also, we have grown communities side by side with each other for a number of years. And I have also joined the Flying Sage as a member and a community leader. So we have a lot of love going on between the two of us, which is why I really wanted the chance to host you, Michael. But since graduating with a degree in cognitive systems from UBC, University of British Columbia, Michael worked as the volunteer coordinator and executive assistant for MAPS Canada for 3 years. During this time, Michael founded the Flying Sage, a community and apparel brand on a mission to democratize transcendence. Additionally, Michael serves as a guide through his own practice, Legacy Journeys, where he offers transformative psychedelic experience towards embodiment and lasting change. And you know what, Michael, going back just a little bit further,
Hmm.
didn't you also establish, like start the UBC Psychedelic Society as well?
Yeah, I did. I kind of came into the university club there just after the club had been established. So my friend Manesh, who some of you might know, he's the psychedelic scientist on YouTube and elsewhere, and then someone named Mia Costco. They kind of founded the club, but then they graduated like that year. So then they needed someone to come in and fill the spot. So I ended up um, yeah, like leading the Psychedelic Society of UBC as the president for about 4 years during my undergrad.
Wow, so that just speaks kind of the history to the history of you building and cultivating communities in the psychedelic space for a long time now. Um, we've had Mia on. Danny hosted Mia just a few weeks ago on here too. We had an amazing conversation. So yeah, and everybody, I have pinned Michael Oliver's website to the top of the page here if you'd care to find out a little bit more about him. And I'm going to switch over um, to pin the Flying Sage in a few minutes as well, which is the community that we're really kind of focusing on today. But why don't you tell us a little bit about the Flying Sage, Michael, just so we know kind of the community that you have built and what it offers and how you've built it and just the sort of general background on the Flying Sage.
Yeah, absolutely. And apologies if my internet is not the greatest. I'll try and switch things around so it can be better, but hopefully you guys can all hear me okay. And yeah, I'll share a little bit more about the Flying Sage. So it was a community that started actually as a apparel brand. It didn't start right away as a community. And I started it with my sister back when I was at university. So this at the time it was just something that I was doing on the side. As Dana mentioned, I was in the psychedelic society at the time and doing classes, so I didn't have too much time, but I started this organization to really try to help people destigmatize psychedelics through apparel. So I had noticed that there was not too many psychedelic clothing brands that were like more modern and like minimal. There was just a lot of like tie dye, a lot of bright colors, which is fine, but not necessarily something that you want to wear to work or you want to like represent just as on your day to day. So I tried to create some apparel that was a little bit more minimal and modern, and mostly just in the form of t-shirts and whatnot. And so that's how the Flying Stage actually started, and then it slowly grew over the next couple of years into a community effort. And so that started with just this realization for me personally that that was something that I was a lot more passionate about than clothing. I looked back at my track record when I was working with the UBC Psychedelic Society. I didn't really like label myself as a community builder, but like looking back, I could kind of just see, and in other areas of my like high school life as well, I'm like, oh, okay, like that's actually something that speaks to me a lot and something that I'm just kind of naturally doing. So I started to lean into that, and once I started to lean into that, things just started to open up more, and doors started to open, and the Flying Sage just started to grow a lot faster, and it felt kind of like that's where it was meant to go. So I started leaning into that with my sister. She continued to help me for a while, and we kind of got the community off the ground, and now we've grown over the last couple of years here in Vancouver to have now like a membership, which Dana kind of alluded to, where people can get free access to events, but also get access to our online platform. We had been pretty focused on the Vancouver scene, but yeah, like Dana mentioned, in the last about year and a bit, we've been kind of expanding into the digital side of things now, and we've got courses on our platform. We've got also a lot of different like partners that share their products or experiences in the platform, including Dana as a community leader. We've got about 10 community leaders that share their things in there, and the hope is that we're really trying to provide access to a lot of state shifting technologies, you can call them, or somatic modalities. And one of those is psychedelics, and that's like a big focus of ours. I'd say psychedelics is at the heart of what we do, but another big focus is breath work. And I'd say that's something that we have a big focus on. Most of our events include some form of breath work. And we also have a big focus around sound, movement, and then finally cold exposure. So although we're definitely a psychedelic community at heart, we we bring in a lot of different modalities, and the big goal is to try and create this community space where people can get support with integration and preparation of these mind expanding states, because as a lot of you probably know already, with even just with something like breath work, you can get to pretty psychedelic heightened states. And so we want to try and support people in all these different areas. And so yeah, that's a little bit more about the Flying Sage.
Thank you. One of the things I really love about it, Michael, is it makes it kind of like we talked in the beginning in the intro about the importance of sharing education and helping to destigmatize and demystify these plant medicines and psychedelics. And one of the things I really, really appreciate about the Flying Sage is that it is kind of, yes, psychedelics may be kind of at the heart of it, but it's so multidimensional that it makes it really unintimidating and accessible to people who maybe are just learning, maybe have never experienced psychedelics, maybe are just curious, maybe just want a community of people who are open-minded and open to expanding their consciousness in many different ways, shapes, and forms. And I think that, in my opinion, I think that's been one of the successes of the Flying Sage. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, thanks for speaking to that. I definitely think that's been something that we've leaned into for sure. It's something I've been quite conscious of because, like you say, it makes things more accessible, right? And if our mission is to democratize transcendence, like another way to say that is to make psychedelics more accessible. I mean, if we're just focusing on psychedelics, and I think especially in today's climate when psychedelics aren't fully destigmatized yet, there's still a lot of misinformation about psychedelics. There's still a lot of people that are unsure or not, maybe haven't even heard about using psychedelics therapeutically or intentionally. I think because that is the climate right now, it, like you say, it's really important to have these other pillars in the community that can draw people in. Our cold plunge challenge is a really good example of that. Like, cold plunging here in Vancouver is becoming quite a thing. I don't know about where everyone else lives who's listening, but cold baths and cold showers, it's all become, I think, quite a craze in the last like year and a half, maybe 2 years. And so that's definitely the case for Vancouver too. Like I live close to a beach here in Vancouver called Kitts Beach, and if you go down there anytime during the week, there's always people cold plunging the ocean. So it's definitely becoming a thing. And so we created this challenge where we just started meeting every kind of Wednesday morning to go in the water, and it started to grow to this really big, one of our biggest events, like drawing the most people. I think on our last Cold Plunge Challenge we had like 240 people sign up, and I think we had close to that show up on that first day to go in the ocean together. So it was quite incredible to see, and it's incredible and also just interesting to see them in the background. We have canopy there with the mushrooms on it. And it's just funny to see, it's like a subtle thing, but like having people doing something like a cold plunge situated next to this mission that we have around psychedelics, even though it's like not super explicit, it just helps to reduce the stigma because there's just small little things, right? Like when we share some information about, people have to like enter a password to basically uh, to count their plunge towards the challenge, because people who complete all the plunges get prizes. And so sometimes the passwords we slip in will be like the other week it was DMT, and then the week before that, or a couple weeks before that, it was MDMA. And some people coming to these cold plunge challenges, they might not know what that is, but like it's just a fun little entry point for people to maybe learn a little bit more or just be curious. And so yeah, I definitely recognize that as an important thing. And I think for all psychedelic communities, it's something to consider, right? Like if your goal is to be a really niche down, maybe community for really advanced or intermediate users with psychedelics, then maybe that's a different story. But if you're trying to, increase access and you want to appeal to people that are you want to support people that are new to psychedelics, I think having other different modalities in your community is important. And maybe that's like other things like fitness, or maybe it's art, right? Like there's lots of communities here that do like microdose and paint nights. I've just seen a few events like that crop up recently, and that's another good example, right? Like it's a low barrier event where most people are, there's lots of people that are fond of painting or art, but then when you combine that with a microdose, it becomes a lot more appealing than like, okay, we're gonna go to this cabin and do like high doses of psychedelics or something like that, right? So I think, yeah, there's definitely a spectrum of different types of events that we offer, and it's important to recognize that for sure.
Yeah, and I find it amazing. Like how many weekly events does the Flying Sage have now in person? Like 4 or 5 that are just standing events every week, right?
Yes, we've got about 5, sometimes 6 events a week now, in person. And so we've got everything from, so every Thursday we have something called our 4-ACO breathwork, which is where we combine a small dose, a microdose of 4-ACO DMT, which is actually really similar to psilocybin for anyone that hasn't heard of that one before. It's not really uh, that similar to DMT. It's more closely related to psilocybin. So it's like a synthetic psilocybin essentially, and we offer a small dose of that with breathwork every Thursday. Then every other Wednesday we have a cannabis ceremony with sound, and then we have a rotating event as well the other Wednesday, where we have kind of different facilitators coming in to offer everything from Tai Chi to movement to like embodiment classes to singing workshops, all sorts of stuff. And then Tuesdays are integration circles. So every Tuesday we run in-person integration circles that are free to anyone who would like to attend. And then Wednesday mornings we've got our cold plunges that run throughout the winter from like October to May. And then let's see what else we got. On Mondays, we usually host a seminar once a month. We also have a monthly ecstatic dance event plus a monthly sound bath, where we have like a gong, yeah, gong sound bath combined with breath work. And then I think there's maybe something else I'm missing too. Um, but those are kind of the main ones. And then
Oh,
we'll have like the odd event here or
expansion
there.
seminars too.
Right, yeah, the expansion seminar. So that's every month, and it's one of our longer standing events, and it's pretty large. So we have about usually between like 45 to 65 people that'll come to those. And Dan has been to a few of those and been a speaker on a few of those, which has been really awesome to collaborate in that way. And yeah, we have different topics, right? So we just bring panelists together, usually 4 panelists to come and speak on different things. So the one that we have upcoming is the sacred feminine and psychedelics, which I know your community is probably familiar with, because I think you guys have a sacred feminine room, don't you? Or like a chat. Yeah, I think you guys have a a
Yeah,
rotating track or something.
I couldn't get off mute there. Sorry.
No worries.
Yeah, Wendy hosts or Wendy had to pop off. Obviously, Wendy hosts our Entheogens in the Divine Feminine Room on Wednesday mornings. So
Okay.
we may tap into some of your speakers on your panel and see if they might like to join us too. And then Danny alternates with her hosting Entheogens in the Divine Masculine. So
Right. Okay. Awesome. Yeah, I saw that. That's really cool. Yeah. So, yeah, those are kind of just a little taste of the different events that we have.
very cool. Yeah, it's we are going to be, for those of you who are joining us, we are going to be talking about a little bit like broader concept than just the flying sage, about healing in community and why community is important and how to develop communities and stuff. But I kind of wanted to set the stage by, letting by talking a bit about the flying sage so you can understand like the scope and the magnitude of this really well established psychedelic community in Vancouver and now global now too. And Michael, you also, I understand, are really involved in the Global Psychedelic Society, are you not?
Yep. I've started volunteering with them. Uh, I don't know when it was, but kind of when they first started, I think. Because I had met Jazz, who's kind of one of the, I guess, the founders of the Global Psychedelic Society. She actually used to be a volunteer with Maps Canada back in the day. So we connected through Maps. And then, yeah, a little while later, her and a few people started the GPS, or the Global Psychedelic Society. And so I went to the psychedelic science happened in Denver this past summer, I guess it was. And so I drove down there to attend, and that's when they had like their kind of inaugural, I think they called it the GPS Summit, where they kind of brought all the different psychedelic society leaders together. So I attended that. That was kind of like my first introduction physically to the community. And then since then, I've been trying to help them specifically with building out their um, starter kit. I think that's what they're calling it, but it's pretty cool for anyone out there who's like interested in maybe building your own psychedelic community. They're creating this like open source guidebook essentially. You could think about it like a course as well, that basically gives you the recipe for how to create a community. They support with all the things like software and teaching people how to incorporate if necessary, or like to obtain a nonprofit status, like everything from like the legal side of things to the social side of things. They're trying to make free resources, and one of the resources they have that's really awesome too is their locator, a community locator. So if you go on their website, globalpsychedelicsociety.org, you'll actually find a database of societies all around the world, and you can just search a city, or you can look on the map and you can find a society near you. So I share that resource a lot because, you know, not for some cities in the world, it's not easy to just search up like the psychedelic society for your city. It might be harder to find, and so they've got this really nice directory there, um, which is really cool to check out.
Oh, cool. I will put that link in our chat shortly as well.
Okay.
Um, yeah, okay, so let's just continue talking about the flying sage for a minute, and talk about how the flying sage has structured community offerings. I mean, that is a lot of community offerings, and I know from being a community builder, like I just listen to it and I shrink because I'm like, how the heck do you manage to run all that? That's a lot on an entrepreneur's plate running a society. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about, how you have structured your community offerings.
Yeah, absolutely. So we just started growing slowly. Like, we started with our integration circles. That's kind of at the heart of what we do, integration support. And we kind of just built around that. We and our integration circles, we tried charging for them initially, but we've ended up just deciding to offer them for free. And we're able to do that because we have a wonderful sponsor, Chi, here in Vancouver, that helps to offer the space to us. But yeah, we kind of just started with integration circles and started expanding outwards from there. Um, when it comes to structuring, I totally agree. It is a lot, and at times it feels maybe a bit too much. But what's been really helpful is having good systems and also good people to support. And when I say good people, I mean staff. So I mean, in the last October, I hired my first community manager, and before that, I'd also hired a virtual assistant. So I'm not by myself on the team, I should say. Like, our actual kind of paid team is, I guess, three of us now. Um, and so that's been super helpful. So Gabby, who's our community manager, at this point, she's actually doing most of the management for the in-person events, which is really nice because that was something that was taking up a lot of time. And then my assistant is actually helping mostly with like publishing all of the technical stuff to do with the events, like the ticketing pages, the websites, sharing a bit to Instagram. So a lot of the operations for posting the events and everything is kind of taken care of by someone on our team. So we spread out the responsibility of organizing all these things between the three of us, which really helps. But then on top of that, because the community has gained traction and people have enjoyed the events, people have stepped up to contribute in their own ways. And that's another thing that is important to mention when you ask about structure, is that I'd say we do rely right now on volunteers as well. I personally feel iffy about that, like because we're a business, um, and there's part of me that feels like, oh well, we shouldn't rely on volunteers if we're a business, but people are really stoked to help out, and people want to contribute, and so for the time being, I've been taking that support, and people get a lot of get I think I get a lot out of it. So for example, we have volunteers that host and facilitate some of our events. So for our seminars and our integration circles, the facilitators are essentially volunteering their time to contribute in those ways. For some of our other events, like our meetups I mentioned, or our cannabis ceremonies, or the breath work, our facilitators get paid. They get paid percentage of the ticket sales, but nonetheless, we still have volunteers that show up here and there to like host or welcome those facilitators, especially if they're new to the community. And so I think in the future, when we have a little bit more funding, or just like more revenue, like I would like to maybe have a few distinct hosts that are maybe paid on our team. But right now, that's kind of how we're structured. We have a few volunteers on our roster that come in and support when we need, and then yeah, we've structured everything. Another big piece I'll just mention, and then let me know if you have any other questions, kind of about anything specific. Another big piece is the membership. So, when we started, we just had a few events, and there wasn't really a need for a membership. But then once we started to have, 3 or 4 or 5 events a month, then we started to see people would come to events multiple times. That's when we started to introduce our membership, which is now like the backbone, I'd say, of our business, because we are a business and a community at the same time. I don't think all communities necessarily have that structure, but we are a business, and we're trying to be a profitable business, but at the same time make psychedelics accessible and democratize transcendence and stick to our mission. So it's an interesting path to walk, but I think we're doing okay. And yeah, a big part of that has been from our membership. So if people become a member with us, a Sage member, they get free access to pretty much all of our events, and that's been a really key part of our structuring too. And then we can talk later about another type of event as well, which is another type of membership, which is more geared towards virtual events. But yeah, those are some of the key pieces about how we've kind of structured to date.
Yeah, such good points there, Michael. Like one of them just that comes to mind about the membership itself is membership-based organizations are tough these days. But what I see with the Flying Sage is that membership makes sense because there are, like you were saying, 5 or 6 events a week. So like almost every day or evening you can find something with the Flying Sage, and if you're paying for each one of those separately, even like 1 or 2 a week is going to be more than your membership itself. So it does really make sense in the way that the Flying Sage has been developed to do that. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on was volunteers.
Yeah.
I hear your angst as a business owner, feeling like, oh, but like I'm making money, or I'm trying to make money as a business owner, and they're just volunteering. And I know like we really struggled with that in Sisters in Psychedelics. Um,
Mhm.
Here in the Flourish Academy, we're all volunteers, me, Danny, and Wendy. None of us get paid, so I don't have to worry about it so much here. But even with gathering groups, we have people who've gone through our programs and they just want to give back. They want to volunteer. They want to be included. And I kind of want to set your mind at ease a little bit. in that, yes, if we are, if we have a lot to share and there's a way to compensate our volunteers, I think that is definitely ethically the way to go. But just, um, volunteers are volunteering because they want to. They are getting something out of it. They're getting the community. They're getting the giving, the support. They have received something themselves that they want to give back. Like through so many conversations with volunteers, and feeling that own angst myself, I've come to more at peace to it. And I just kind of wanted to offer that to you a little bit of peace of mind around that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I would like to definitely bring more peace of mind around it. It's not something that concerns me too much, but it comes up every once in a while. And so, yeah, it's nice to hear that you've kind of experienced that same thing when you were growing sisters, and even with the projects you're working on now. So thanks for speaking to that.
Well, and I mean, even with the Flying Sage too. Like I am a community leader with the Flying Sage, and I know you're always trying to, you're always very conscientious of like how can you bring value back to us, and how can you compensate us in one way or another. And but it's a heartfelt mission when we're volunteers. I think in so many times. So.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just having a sip of my hot tea, trying to keep my sore throat soothed here.
uh,
Ugh. Um, let's step back a little bit, Michael, and just talk about the importance of community around psychedelics to start with. Like at the beginning of this room, I kind of professed my own passion for why I feel community is so critical in general, but particularly in this space. And I'm really curious to hear, what you think about why community is so important in the psychedelic space.
yeah, for sure. So for me, like, I think a lot of it stems from this piece around access. And working with maps for a few years, I became really familiar with the clinical trial process, and just like how psychedelics are kind of on track to be medicalized, and like what the intentions are for that process and how it originated. And I think it's a really important piece of this puzzle of trying to make psychedelics accessible and bring them into the world in a fair, safe, and effective way. But I think that there's some pieces of that puzzle that are kind of missing, and I think community is one of those pieces. And it's like this, in my mind, like this huge pillar that not only is like a buzzword, because I think community is kind of a buzzword. I feel like it always has been. Like, I don't know, like I've just heard people talk about community, like sometimes it's a little wishy-washy. And I hope to never um, talk about community like that, because when I'm trying to convey thoughts about community, like I want to be as like concrete as possible. And and I think what it comes down to is like just different models of access, right? And like psychedelics in a community context is just like such an important thing because of the the model that it offers. And specifically, I mean this this aspect of having groups. Like, groups is a really important piece. Right now, the existing trajectory for a lot of legal psychedelic medicines, like MDMA assisted psychotherapy, for example, it's on track to be legalized in the context of having two therapists with one participant. And that just gets really expensive. That's one of the big issues um, with the current trajectory of medicalization. It gets really expensive when you have that sort of ratio. I mean, arguably, there's really good safety profile there, which is great. But something that I've been thinking more about lately is like I don't necessarily think that the apparatus that required us, or that MAPS basically was required to construct to complete clinical trials to get these psychedelics, approved by the FDA. That whole clinical medical apparatus is not necessarily the same thing that we need, I think, to like scale psychedelic healing to people that really need it. And I think it's not to undermine anything that MAPS has done, because they've done incredible work, and it's been since 1986, they've been paving the way and building that foundation, building advocacy. One of the most impressive feats of philanthropy and crowdfunding that I've ever heard of. So it's not to undermine what they're doing, but it's I guess it's just to say that now that we've reached this point where there is acceptance that, okay, these things are actually positive, which really most people who've done psychedelics could have just told you that, right? But we had to go through this whole clinical process to to prove it, I guess, right? To prove it to the government. But now that we're there, I would just really hope that we don't have to lean into the exact same structure that kind of brought us here, if that makes sense. I think it's time to now broaden the horizon a little bit and look at how people really use psychedelics. And I think a big part of that is looking at this community piece. And so recognizing that not everyone is going to really even want to go do psychedelics in a clinical space or a clinic, right? Um, let alone, yeah, people aren't really going to want to necessarily venture into the psychedelic space in that way. I think a lot of people are a lot more comfortable doing psychedelics by themselves or with friends. And I think for those that aren't, there's this big opportunity here for communities to step in and to create spaces that people, where there's a lot of education. I think that's one of the key pillars, and I think you mentioned that earlier on in the conversation. It's communities can provide a type of education that's really impactful for people, and I think that can really empower people to understand how to use psychedelics themselves. And that's a big kind of thing that I bring into my, I guess you could call it advocacy, right? And not everyone maybe will agree with that, but I think that people can be empowered to use psychedelics themselves. There's obviously a place for this clinical pathway with people that have certain mental health conditions. But for the majority of people, I do believe that the majority of people who can benefit from psychedelics don't have a mental health diagnosis. It's people, your everyday person that, I mean, maybe the mental health diagnosis is that culture is pretty crazy and sick in lots of ways. But I don't want to pin that down on people individually, right? I think it's more of a cultural thing that we're experiencing, and the majority of people, I think, with the right education and the right set and setting, they can learn to use psychedelics themselves. And I think community is the vehicle for that. And that just to me seems like a lot more accessible path. So anyways, there's a few more things I could say, but I'm gonna pause there and see what you think.
Okay, we'll take a pause, but let's keep this conversation going. I love it. So, what I'm hearing from you is a few things. Number one is that, well, and I believe, I agree with pretty much everything you said. So, let's just start there. But scalability and accessibility are big issues. The more people that have safe and educated, I suppose, access to psychedelics, in a sense, the better our world is going to be. And so, lots of kudos to MAPS and the legalization route that is, I feel, very necessary to get governments and government agencies on board with us so that we can lead to democratization. I think legalization and that legalized model is a first step. And I do think that there are many different models, and I know you and I work with these medicines in many different ways, and we do have clients that we work with just one-on-one and as well as in groups. But one thing that comes up for me, well, a couple things. First of all, you said, kind of democratizing psychedelics for the everyday person, because there's not diagnoses are not the only reason to be using psychedelics. There's spiritual growth, there's personal development, there's just optimization of ourselves, and why shouldn't we all have access to do that as well? But I think one thing that comes up for me a lot, and this is kind of the basis of gathering groups, and I see Peg, who is with Gathering Groups, has joined us today too, so that's great because he'll be a beautiful person to add into this conversation. But one of the things that we lean back on in Gathering Groups is community is how plant medicines have been consumed since the beginning of time. It's been in community and not necessarily in group settings. Like, that's not necessarily what we mean is use them together in a group, but use them in a context of a community that is supportive, and that yeah, is kind of in it with you, and I don't even know how to say that more clearly with my foggy brain this morning, but I think, yeah, looking back historically, I think community is where these medicines originated. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's a really important distinction to make between doing psychedelics in a group and doing psychedelics in community, because they're not the same thing. Like, you can have people that are doing psychedelics individually, but then are using a community to support with their preparation and integration. And I think that's a really important distinction, because I take that a lot of people that are maybe not as familiar with the community model will kind of assume that we're talking about just doing psychedelics in groups. And while that's an important part of it, I think the more important things that need to be highlighted are actually in that other camp of what you shared, like where there's people that are doing psychedelics either with by themselves or with friends, and then they're using the community as like an ecosystem, right? They're using the community as um, support with preparation and integration. And one tangible like anecdote I guess I can share around that is something that I've noticed with our breathwork ceremonies, just as an example. So as I mentioned earlier, like breathwork is a really powerful tool when you do certain types of breathwork, right? And what we found in the flying sage community, at least, is that when when people start to come to our events regularly, they get to connect with one another and they get to know each other more. And I think any community that really feels like a community, you're going to be making friends and it'll feel friendly, and you'll make new connections that you haven't made before. And so something that we've really clear that we've noticed is that when we have these small events, with a maximum of like 17 people, I mean, you could say that that's maybe even big in some cases, but lots of our breathwork events are capped out at 17 people. So when we have events with about 10 to 17 people in them, we found that when people are like know each other really well, and they've had the time over the course of a few weeks or even months to like get to know each other, when they come together to drop into a medicine space or a breathwork space, they're able to go so much deeper into the experience. They're able to surrender more than they normally would be able to, because they feel the safety, right? And I think when we talk about psychedelics and their like how they operate and what makes for an effective psychedelic experience, I think surrender is a big piece, right? Arguably, lots of people say that to the degree to which you're able to kind of surrender to the experience is maybe a big part of the piece of how effective that experience will be for you. And so that's just something that I think is really crucial to note, is like the community spaces and ecosystems, they have their effects on people, like on the long term. Like, it's something that you build up over the course of a few months, and that's something that you just can't get in like these other standardized models, right? Where you and like I want to be open-minded to it, because I personally haven't gone through a clinical trial. I personally haven't gone to a ketamine clinic and had an experience there, or even like, let's say, a clinic maybe that's offering psilocybin therapy. I haven't personally been through any of those specific environments, because personally it doesn't really appeal to me too much. But so I want to give those spaces the benefit of the doubt. But I feel like as a client walking into that sort of setting, you're not really getting to work that much with other clients too much, right? Especially if it's an individual session. And if it's a group session, I would hope that there's you know increased sessions where you get to connect with people. But yeah, I think that's what comes up for me the most when you share about that. And I think it's such an important distinction that you make there, Dana.
Yeah, I know, we kind of struggle with that with gathering groups of, we sure when we get to the medicine retreat, we are experiencing it as a group, but what we have really done is built community in the 8 weeks that our small group meets before we drop into the medicine. Like you were saying, it just prepares our bodies, calms our nervous system, creates a space of trust. And I think like one of our struggles is really kind of communicating the difference between group work and community based. Do you have any hints and tips on that? How do you differentiate?
Between group work and community work?
Community based, yeah.
Well, I think it comes back to a big part of it comes back to what you shared earlier, when we were talking about, which was like having different modalities, right? Like when you have like a community, an ideal community in my mind, especially with psychedelics, is one that does have multiple kind of offerings, because people, especially if you're in the high dose range, like people aren't doing high doses of psychedelics all the time, right? Like that's something that you got to build up to. You do it, and then you probably most likely aren't going to do it again for quite some time. Like it's something that's quite unique in that sense. And so, especially if you're doing high dose psychedelic work, um, people aren't going to be able to actually be doing the medicine all the time. So there's got to be other ways that people can connect with each other. And so I think having a community environment where there's multiple different offerings and opportunities for people to make connections is really key. And you can do that, like I think it's more difficult to do that in person. And I am one thing I'm grateful for with the Flying Sage, without really knowing it, like we've built our foundation around the in person. And I think that that's really important, because I do see a lot of communities that go the other way and their foundation is like virtual, which makes sense in certain cases, especially for example during COVID, when so many communities were created and it wasn't really possible to actually meet in person. For some people it makes sense, but I think there's definitely a felt presence with in-person experiences that should be prioritized in community, and that affords people a sort of connection that's not otherwise found in virtual spaces. So I think that's an important piece. But yeah, I think it's like, to your question and point about group versus community, I think a community has multiple groups in it. Like I think about it like that. Like a community, there's there can be space for multiple subgroups to form, for different um yeah, friend groups to form. Really, that's essentially what it becomes, is like different friend groups emerging, just like you would have maybe in a school. Hopefully not exactly like you might have in a school experience, at least.
Like no
um
mean girls?
yeah, exactly. Or rude jock boys, or whatever it might be for you, and recounting different high school experiences and whatnot. But yeah, it's just like this piece I'm trying to communicate is around just like the fact that, yeah, there's multiple groups can be contained, I guess, within a community. And I think it's important to have these like different offerings, so that um, people can people can build up connection over like a long period of time, right? I think that's what the community affords, because you can get like a retreat, for example, is a good example of like a group experience, right? Like you can get a bunch of people that show up, maybe as strangers. They show up to, like, let's say they go to Costa Rica and they have a retreat. There's a retreat center there. You show up and you have this beautiful experience that's like super well done. Let's just say it's at a really top notch center. There's lots of support leading up to the event, and hopefully there's some support following. Um, but then, if everyone's flying in from all over the world to come to this place and then they leave and go back home, like, where is the community now? Like, it's very hard for the retreat center to maintain that support. Like, they're going to have to do it digitally. So already there, it's like that's going to be a challenge. And then on top of that, like, people are now in their own environment and rhythm, and it's unique and different. And I know some people that tell me that they've had a transformative experience at a retreat, and they ended up staying in touch with their fellow journeyers like years later, and they have like reunions and stuff. And I find that so awesome, um and like cute and just lovely. But at the same time, I'm like, oh, I wish that you wouldn't have to wait that long to like connect with those people. Like, I wish that you also could maybe access that more frequently in your day-to-day life. And so, yeah, those are just a few thoughts that come up.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your perspectives on that. Super insightful, and I do think like it's one unique thing about the Flying Sage is so many, particularly in the psychedelic space, so many psychedelic communities were built online because it kind of coincided, the Renaissance, I suppose you call it, kind of coincided with COVID. Um,
Yeah.
and yet, the Flying Sage has done it very differently, like really developed a super strong community in our local home base of Vancouver, and now kind of branching out globally with more online offerings and stuff. And I do know, like even for you and I, when there are certain circumstances and certain times when people do want to work kind of one on one with a facilitator, and that's where you and I come together for that. And I know that even when we work one on one with people, one of the things that we always work with them on afterwards is where is your community? Where is your community? Come into our community if you need a community. There, we've got, Flying Sage. We have Vancouver Women in Psychedelics. We have some other online ones we can provide them with. But where is your community? And that kind of leads into my next question, which we've been touching on through the whole conversation, but just wanted to know if you might want to go a little bit deeper on this about what makes psychedelic communities unique.
Yeah, it's a good question. I feel like one important piece is just maybe like the magnitude of the shared experience is pretty powerful. Psychedelics are ineffable. The experience of psychedelics is ineffable, and so meaning that it's very hard to understand what the experience is like if you haven't had the experience. And I think that's the case for some things in life, but not most things. Like most things in life, like if you join a cooking community, for example, like you've probably in your life interacted with the experience of cooking at least indirectly, like maybe your parents have cooked for you, or you've tried to cook yourself something in the microwave, or maybe you're really like cooking, right? But like everyone has a relationship to cooking no matter what. And so you can kind of fathom what a community around cooking might look like. You can easily decide whether you want to be a part of it or not based on your how much you like cooking, I guess. And you could say the same thing for so many different examples. But with psychedelics, like I think there's a unique thing there where maybe people who have had the psycho experience before, they're craving for connection in a way that I don't quite see everywhere else. Like they're craving for understanding and people to understand the experience that they've had, because a lot of people, especially when it's their first time doing psychedelic, it's like it can be pretty incredible. It can be really paradigm shifting for an individual, and senses, frameworks of reality and the way that we see ourselves in the world can oftentimes frequently drastically change. And in the wake of those experiences, it's really important for people to seek out people that understand those experiences. But if you haven't had the experience, it's really hard to really connect with someone on it. So I think with psychedelic communities, they're extra important because the type of experience that the communities share is like focused around, like the shared experience of the community. You could say like the niche of the community, or what everyone is bonding over, is like this really powerful, unique experience that you can only really understand once you've had it. So I think that's one thing that stands out to me, is like why psychedelic communities are important, is because it, we need them for people to be able to understand their experiences. And then a lot of the other pieces that I might speak to are kind of things that we've spoken to already, and it's like preparation and integration come up. Those are really big ones, right? So some people don't have maybe the knowledge or understanding of how to prepare for psychedelic experience, and I think communities can help with that a lot, not only in just like actually educating people, for example, like here's a free course on how to prepare for psychedelics, but or like here's an article, or here's a talk where someone's helping you with that. But like in our case, like it's important to make a distinction just briefly with like anything. The Flying Sage doesn't do any high dose psychedelic experiences, and that's really important to stress, because I think there's different types of experiences that you can have, right, with psychedelics. And so we use psychedelics in microdose capacities. But even though we do that, the a lot of the somatic experiencing that is important to understand when you're going into a psychedelic experience, it comes up through our breathwork ceremonies, or through some of our meditations, or even through the cold exposure that we do. And so there's like this preparation piece that is kind of implicit in some of the offerings that we have. And I'll just use the flying stages as example, because obviously I'm most familiar with it, but like that, it's not something that we are super explicit about, but it comes back to this piece that we talked about earlier of like, why do we have all these different things? Well, they actually all kind of connect in lots of ways, because there are all these different somatic modalities that actually can allow people to tune into their body more. So for example, with cold exposure, like it's an incredible tool for being able to um, drop into your body, and also to be able to relax your nervous system kind of consciously using your breath. There's this really interesting interplay with breathing and the cold, and learning how to do that can then transfer over. The somatic understanding of that transfers over really well to psychedelics. And the same thing is true of breathwork. Like if you're having an intense breathwork ceremony, and you're in a group situation where facilitators are aiding you through the process of moving through certain material, it's a very low barrier um, way to experience like a heightened, expanded state. And then everything that you're learning in that process, the somatic um, embodied pieces, they all get transferred, so that when you do decide to do a psychedelic, it's like, oh hey, like I'm not exactly familiar with this particular way things are moving around right now, but I'm familiar with my ability to kind of navigate this kind of altered state. So I don't know, that's something that comes up with preparation. And then the same is true with integration, right? Your question was, why are psychedelic communities important? And then you've mentioned it too, but like the integration piece as well, right? So when people are, I can even go back to my example of someone going to a retreat center, even in a retreat center that might be of like the highest quality, highest caliber. They're not like, any of the integration support they're going to have is going to be fairly distant. Like it's going to be some packages, maybe some connections, some virtual calls, but I think there's more to integration that can really be able to provide. And I think having an in-person connection with people in your own local community is like super important. And so psychedelic communities are important because they they allow people, whether they've done psychedelics by themselves, with a friend, at a clinic, at a retreat center, it's like another place to be able to experience that. And I hope that these institutions also start to have communities more, right? And I think that is happening, and that's great, and there's going to be overlap, and it's wonderful. But I think yeah, for some people it's going to be extra important to have that in-person piece. So hopefully those pieces made sense there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just was like nodding my head, like agree, agree, agree. Yeah.
Okay.
And I have to say, I also did put the link for gathering groups in the chat, because if you are in the audience looking for high dose experiences with community, it's something that the Flying Sage, it's not part of their community, and this is another healing in community opportunity. So you can check that out as well. But let's just, I have to open this up to the stage. I want to keep talking to you. I have more questions. Okay, so I'm still going to ask a couple. Um, Talking about healing in community. How does healing happen in community?
Well, I think I spoke to it a little bit, so I won't go too much into it, but I think for me, it comes down to, yeah, this like ongoing container that's created, right? And so, I'll just use the flying stage as an example again. Like in our community, healing happens over the course of months, right? It's not something that's quick, and usually never is. But with community, it's something that you can build up, and it comes down to that safety factor. Like you meet people in the community that you feel more comfortable with, you continue showing up to different events with them, and then as time goes on, you just feel more comfortable around these people, because there's trust that's built up. There's an understanding that these people are my people, and these people um, are have the same intention as me for my kind of exploration, right? Like the general intention of maybe trying to reach wholeness, or to heal, and to be intentional with these medicines. And so I think healing in community happens slowly. It happens with people that are increasingly getting to know each other more, and yeah, it's a slow process. And I think that it it happens organically also, right? Like, I don't think a community can really like control these experiences for people. That it's just about creating the safe environment for individuals to kind of flourish in. And yeah, those are just a few pieces that come up for me.
Yeah, I think what I've heard a lot before is, in general, we're not wounded in isolation, and we don't heal in isolation. Community is so critical. But Michael, I'm going to open it up to the stage. But one last thing I want to ask you is, I know that recently, based on um, kind of the experiences that you've had with building community. I mean, you built community for MAPS as well as volunteer coordinator, et cetera, but that you're actually offering coaching around community building now as well. And I just wanted to ask you one last question before we go around to other people's. In your opinion and your experience, how can people go about starting their own psychedelic community?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the most important things I think initially is to kind of scope out what the environment is like in your area. Obviously, in terms of legality, I should say, like that is an important thing to consider. And so here in Vancouver, we're super progressive and kind of liberal on the psychedelic front, and I know a lot of cities join us in that. But there's also lots of places in the world that are a bit more conservative, or a lot more conservative in some cases. So I think just first identifying kind of where your geography kind of aligns with psychedelics and what the laws are, being very mindful of that. But assuming that there's opportunity there to create a community, or maybe you look around and you don't see something like that happening already, then I think starting my recommendation, just based on my experience, is to start simple and to start with integration support. Start with integration circles. These are really like low cost, low barrier things that you can do either virtually or in person. And you might even decide to host these out of your home, or maybe partner with a yoga studio, or some place that's already offering events, and somewhere that just has an extra couple hours in their schedule where you can come in and offer something. I think integration circles are a great way to start, give you a sense of what it's kind of like to bring people together around psychedelic healing, because I think that's a really key thing. Or you could do the same thing for like preparation circles too, right? Or just sharing circles. You could have psychedelic sharing circles where people can come to share about, get support with preparation or integration. So there's lots of ways to kind of structure that, but I think having some sort of initial offering like that would be a really cool way to kind of dip your toes in the water. And if it feels like something that you want to continue doing, then just slowly kind of building out from there. I mentioned that the GPS has some really cool resources around this, so they're building they're building this handbook, which will be pretty useful. I'm also personally getting ready to release a course that will walk you through every single thing that I know about community, as well as like providing a bit of a business operating system, which will probably be more useful for people that are like down the path a little bit already, not someone that's just getting started. But that's a resource I'll mention and share. And then yeah, outside of that, like just lean in to help, and reach out for support. People who show up to the community are likely going to want to help you build it, and that's a really beautiful thing that we've kind of spoke to already. People want to get involved, people want to support. And so when you see that help showing up and people being engaged, like don't be afraid to like lean into that, especially at the start. And and just most importantly, like gauge the community of people that are showing up and serve those people, right? Be of service to the people that are right in front of you. Don't think too much about the end goal or where you might want to eventually get to. Like just focus on the people that are right in front of you, and like what do they want, what do they need. And I think if you focus on that first, it's a lot more manageable to think of, and it also will just lead to a really beautiful organic growth of your community.
I love it. It's like a microdosing philosophy. Start low, go slow.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, I have totally hogged the time with you. We're going to open it up and we are going to move around. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and your expertise. And I'm going to pass it over to my co-moderator, who usually heads up these Friday rooms, over to Danny to see what you might like to contribute to the conversation today, Danny.
Hey guys, it's been a really great conversation so far. I am just going to pass the mic, and I know Peg is probably has a lot of stuff to contribute to the conversation, so I'm going to yield my time.
I'm thinking he might too, Danny. We're going to go pull to refresh. We got my other co moderator, Wendy, and then we'll head over to Peg after that.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for this beautiful conversation. I don't have much to add, but I just want to say I'm so thankful for it because I have had some community building things that I have gotten the ping to do. And this conversation has really motivated me to start doing those. So I'm excited. And so thank you.
Thanks, Wendy, and thank you for being here and being for our other co-moderator in the Flourish Academy. And yes, Peg, Healing in Community. We've got another community builder here. Over to you, Peg.
Oh wow, it's been so great hearing this conversation about community and just love what you're doing. I think you're really making kind of you're in my mind you are like 5 years ahead of where this movement is going on our planet, and you have got such good insight on how this work really wants to come into community. And when I say that, I guess the stuff that I really resonated with was like, Michael, you really rightly said that the medical model, which is really it's coming in like that's the way it's coming into Canada, right? And that's there's a lot of pressure that way. It's not really going to address kind of 85% of the people that want to engage in these plant medicines, right? It's the average person doesn't need to have a DSM-5 diagnosis in order to access these medicines. That's not how these medicines have worked with communities for thousands of years. These have been, I remember talking even with Mark Hayden, like this is 5, 6 years ago. And I remember interviewing him for Dose 2. And I said to him in one of my last questions, I said, tell me what you think good looks like in 10 years. And he said, what good looks like is that these medicines have become part of of life, and so that mothers are doing MDMA with their daughters, on retreats with grandmothers and families, and fathers are taking sons with other men and their sons out into a vision quest and using psilocybin to connect as families and as these rites of passage. And I remember just kind of my mouth was on the ground. The only framework I had was kind of clinical trials and helping people with mental health crises. And although, yes, these substances do have that kind of gear, I think you're so right that that's not how they're going to be sustainably engaged on our planet. We've got to bring them inside of these communal structures. And I think what we're seeing is a breakdown of like our family of origin. So we don't have kids that really live near their parents much anymore. We go to where the jobs are. So we have a breakdown of kind of the family structure. We have a breakdown of kind of these places of religious and spiritual communities. So people have left those, for the last, I don't know how many hundreds of years, people have relied on their faith communities as places of transformation and growth and healing. But those places are no longer sustaining people. They become places of alienation, of shame, of guilt, of people feeling kind of not enough. And so people are looking for, where can I go to find real connection? Where can I go to feel I can be seen and heard and held? And then lastly, the one aspect we haven't really talked about, but it's an interesting part of community, which is the power of ritual, right? I mean, these are ceremonies that we're doing. This isn't just a medical intervention. This is a ceremony, and a ceremony has structure. It has kind of it has kind of a ritual to it, and these are the things that human beings have needed for thousands of years. We've needed containers where we, celebrate the spring equinox or the summer solstice. We've come together for these kind of interesting, kind of communal
physical in presence moments where people can celebrate, dance, have a sense of singing together, of not just doing psychedelics, but actual doing the kind of stuff that Michael is engaging with people, right? Let's do a cold plunge together. Let's go have breath work. This doesn't have to be all about plant medicine. Plant medicines are just a beautiful a way that can help people transform. So I guess my first comment was I just love how you're really opening up the conversation to move it beyond just the kind of quote clinical trials and kind of the two therapists, one person. That's not what people want. When you ask them, they're like, that's all they know. They don't even know there's any other model. And so what people really are wanting is connection. And so that was a really big insight. I really appreciated the way you framed that, Michael. And I think the other thing too that you rightly I just wanted to jump up and down and celebrate was um, what happens when you are with a group of people that you start to feel known. You talked about those groups of maximum 17 people, and as people start showing up week after week, what happens is your nervous system, this is not a cognitive thing, this is on the nervous system regulation, right? This is what we call polyvagal theory. The fact that our vagus nerves begin to kind of co-regulate with other people and when we feel safe and seen. And when that happens, as Michael just said, you can go deeper, you can let go, you can actually find this release that happens in these experiences when your nervous system is regulated. It's impossible for you to do that if you drop into an ayahuasca ceremony in Costa Rica and you don't know anyone. As great as that transformative experience might be, your system does not have the time to regulate. That takes weeks and sometimes even months, right? So that's why some of these ceremonies in indigenous communities they want you to prepare for 6 months. They want you to really go through the process of preparing so that you're ready to really let go and get the maximum benefit out of these high dose spiritual experiences. So, anyways, I'm really thrilled that this conversation is out into the world, because this is the right conversation that we need to have. This is about belonging, connection, and how we heal when we are seen and known by others. And that's got to be the foundation of how we prepare, hold, and integrate people. So those are some thoughts I had, but just really want to I really want to just applaud what you're doing, Michael. I think the Flying Sage is a beacon for what good looks like on how to do this. So thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Peg. I really, really, really appreciate you saying that and everything you shared. I really, admire what you guys are doing with gathering groups as well. And I think it's, really awesome to be having this conversation, like you say, and to put it out into the world, to have other people tune in and learn about what psychedelic communities can look like. And I also love that you brought up the ritual piece, because that's something that you said that we didn't chat about. And yeah, I totally agree with you on that front. The ritual part is really important, and it's something that I notice here and there with Flying Sage. Just like sometimes it's subtle things, right, that we don't even necessarily think of as ritual, but that become really important aspects of ritual. And I think in community, having those repetitive things, no matter whether it's a psychedelic community or not, I think ritual is so important, and it's something that is just even more important with these psychedelic ceremonies.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here, Peg, and for contributing to the conversation. Obviously, I know how important healing in community is for you. With gathering groups, it's enough that it compelled me to jump on board and to be facilitating and helping to lead with you. So, you guys, Michael and Peg, two of the strongest psychedelic community leaders I know. It's just a blessing to have you both in this room here together. Reverend Resin, hello and welcome. I'd love to hear what's on your mind today. Hoping you can join us there, Reverend. Just give you a second. Okay, I am not hearing anything from you. Let me know if you want to come off mic and join the conversation, Reverend. Since you're on stage, you are welcome to join us. In the meantime, we have just a few minutes left, and if anyone else wants to join us and contribute, we do have a few minutes left, so feel free to join us. We are talking with Michael Oliver of the Flying Sage about psychedelic community building. This is Psychedelics 101, where the Flourish Academy meets every Friday morning to talk about psychedelics. I got a little distracted there. I hope I said that right. Anyways, yeah, okay, we have Avi with us, so I'm going to turn it over to one of our community members, our family members, a beautiful member of the Flourish Academy, and see what's on your mind, Avi.
Hi, I've been listening in while getting bits and pieces of work done, and I really loved what I heard, and what I loved most about the conversation, or at least the parts of the conversation that I heard, was that there's this leaning in toward communities that hold space for harm reduction, and as as a person getting long in the tooth, despite what my picture may look like, there's been I've really watched the psychedelic communities move in cycles, and honestly, I have always felt a little bit hesitant with the majority of the communities. And I've always kind of had the stance of, I'm going to stand here on the edge and watch to make sure this is safe, because safety is a really important thing for me, especially in those spaces where we are becoming so vulnerable in working with entheogens and psychedelics. And I just I just have a very strong harm reductionist, trauma informed, don't want to put myself or anyone else in harm's way kind of I don't know, pee under my mattress. I don't know why I picked that analogy, but I did. So, I've been watching and I've been listening for a really long time, and I've watched different communities come and go, and I've spoken my piece when invited into communities where I didn't feel that they were very safe, and insulted my fair share of people, and it never in an accusing way, just this isn't for me and this is why. And if it's for you, and that's amazing, but it's not for me. And so now there's this very interesting space where I'm beginning to see more and more of this similar awareness of harm reduction, this similar awareness of really genuinely wanting to not only create safe space, but create those connections that you were beautifully speaking about. So I just really want to highlight and name the beauty within this psychedelic renaissance that we find ourselves in, at this speaking into the establishing and the holding of these safe communities. And I think, I don't know if this was spoken into, but it feels important to name that there is this growing wisdom and what I would call eldership within these spaces that are really standing the ground for there to be connection and safe space and trauma informed people. I was going to say the word facilitators, but not all of the communities have specific facilitators, but there's always someone safe to hold the space. So I just really wanted to jump up here and say, golly, isn't it amazing where we are now? And thank you for this room.
Thanks, Avi. Thanks for sharing that. Nice to hear you and to connect with you. And yeah, I really appreciate hearing what you picked up from the conversation. And I totally agree with you. Like around harm reduction, I feel like harm reduction and community are almost synonymous in my mind when it comes to psychedelics. And I think that that really is the foundation, and something that I hope that will be the foundation of psychedelics moving forward. Um, And I think you see that in some ways with like the current medical process and the legalization, but I think there's another level to that we can embrace, that I feel like maybe our culture is not has been kind of scared to consider, or maybe just not had felt safe to, like, honestly, just because of the absurd kind of legal battle that's taken place with these substances. But now hopefully we'll reach a point where our culture collectively can feel safe to like lean into something that's a little bit more less strict and rigid, and something that's more flexible and distributed and decentralized, and yeah, like you say, that's just founded on this pillar of harm reduction that will make these communities feel more safe, because you're totally right, the safety piece is paramount. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, I hear that so much. Community is harm reduction, and community is medicine, and community offers healing. Yeah, just so many reasons to have these strong and safe communities in the psychedelic space. And Avi, thank you for being such an integral part of our community here on Clubhouse for like years now. So awesome to have everybody here joining us in our little community here. Um, Michael, there was a question that I usually ask all our guests at the beginning of our rooms, and I just somehow glossed over it. And I just thought in the last few minutes that we have, I might just come back to it. We always start off our rooms with a moment of gratitude, and we kind of take a moment to think about our elders or those who've come before us, maybe a chance to think about our mentors or people who've influenced us, and that we really would like to, express some gratitude for helping us be where we are now, doing what we're doing now. And I just wanted to give you a moment to see if there's anyone or anything that you wanted to reflect on with gratitude there.
Yeah, that's a really nice question. Thanks for asking. Let's see. A few people come up. My friend Isaac, who I met in Thailand and did mushroom shakes together, he inspired me to create the Flying Sage, and back when it was just a clothing thing. So I gotta give some props to Isaac. And then, I mean, my parents for sure for being supportive of this path, and mentors that I've had throughout kind of my experience here at MAPS. Sorry, my experience in the psychedelic space, but um, yeah, and with MAPS in particular, like the people that I got to connect to through my time there, it's really hard to name any single person, because there was lots of really amazing volunteers and people that made up that journey with MAPS, and so, I mean, a few people like Mark, for example, comes to mind, someone that I think taught me a lot about the psychedelic space and just what's kind of required to build community. He was actually really passionate about that, and I think I definitely learned a few things from him. And then all the giants, you could say, that we're standing on the shoulders of in the psychedelic space. Terrence is one of my big idols, or I don't know if idol is a good word, but someone that I've learned a lot from and look up to a lot. And I think if I had to have a conversation with one person, alive or dead, it would probably be him, Terrence McKenna. And so, yeah, big shout out to him, and Alan Watts and Eckhart Tolle, and there's probably other people I can't think of right now, but those are some names that come to mind.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And before we wrap up for the day, Michael, is there anything else that, that's burning on your mind or on your heart around psychedelic community building that we didn't get a chance to chat about yet, and that you might like to share with the group, or any kind of final last words from you before we head off into our beautiful Friday afternoons here in Vancouver?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. There's nothing really that we didn't cover. I really appreciated all the questions that you shared with me, and appreciate getting the opportunity to share some thoughts here with the Flourish Academy. And if anyone wants to learn more about psychedelic community building, feel free to reach out to me. I think Dana shared my website here earlier. You can go to my bio and find me there. That's where you can learn about kind of all the different things that I'm I'm doing. And I'd love to connect with any of you who want to chat more about this. So feel free to reach out.
Absolutely. And if you're checking out the Flying Sage, people, there is a tier of membership that's called the Mushroom Tier membership, and it's offered on a sliding scale with a 3-day free trial. So feel free to join. And even if you're not in Vancouver, Flying Sage has recently expanded into global offerings with online community as well. So I encourage you to check it out. The link is at the top of the page. And yeah, thank you so much for being here, Michael. This is the Flourish Academy. We are a club of our own, a community of our own, a family of our own here, built on the Clubhouse app, but active in very many places. This is Psychedelics 101. We meet every Friday morning to talk about everything and anything psychedelics. And Danny is our usual moderator of this room. And the Flourish Academy hosts 3 rooms a week. So join us as a community, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 9 a.m. Pacific. We host Entheogens in the Divine Feminine, alternating with the Divine Masculine on Wednesdays, Psychedelic Microdosing 101 on Thursdays, and Psychedelics 101 on Friday. Next week, Wendy is hosting Entheogens and the Divine Feminine, and she's going to be talking about sacred dance. Next Friday in this room is Peer Accountability in Psychedelic Facilitation with Ashley Carmen, who's the founder of the Psychedelic Guide Network. So I encourage you to join us if you are a facilitator or a guide, or maybe you are looking for a facilitator or a guide and want to make sure that you end up with somebody safe. And I'll tell you what, next Thursday in microdosing, I have no topic and no guest right now. We had a guest who isn't able to make it, so it is wide open. And so I encourage you as our family to reach out to me and let me know what you want to talk about. What do you want to hear about? Is there a guest that you'd like me to bring in? Do you have any expertise that you might like to bring into the room? I'm wide open right now on Thursday, so haven't landed on anything. So I'd love to hear from the community and make sure that we are giving you what you want to learn and how you want to be supported. So with that, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as Wendy instigated for us, and now we do in our rooms before we head off into our days, I invite the people who are on the stage with us to come off mic if it's safe and you feel comfortable, and to take a big deep of gratitude in through your lungs, expanding with gratitude, and let it out. And have a great day, everybody. See you next week.
Thank you.